Today is July 5th, 2011. My name is Donald Smith, and we're interviewing Jennings Paul Hill. He was born on January 28th, 1924 in Logan, West Virginia. And he was a member of the Merchant Marine and was in the service a total of 12 years. Is that correct?
Well, not exactly. To war's end, then we were discharged from the maritime service, and I stayed on merchant ships.
Okay.
Commercial merchant ships from 1953.
But the government involvement in the Merchant Marine, where they take them over in wartime, was ended after a certain point.
Right.
And your rank upon leaving was a deck officer, as a
Yes, correct.
Okay. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project and the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. We're in Fairhope, Alabama, at the public library. As I said earlier, Mr. Hill, you were born in West Virginia. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I was born up a holler, if you know what that is.
Yes, sir.
And we were wiped out during a depression. I do remember that. And my dad lost his business and all kinds of things. So at about age 16, I decided I would help the family out, and I went to Mobile and got a job on some harbor boats, tugs, and so on. And I stayed there until I stayed with that until I tried to join the Navy in 1943, early 43. And they sent me to the maritime service. They said they needed me on those ships. I already had experience on boats and so on. So they sent me to maritime school in Brooklyn, New York. And when I finished that school, we came out as what we call able-bodied seamen. That was a step up from ordinary seamen.
From an ordinary.
And they sent a bunch of us to New Orleans after school. And I came to Mobile. They sent me to Mobile, I believe in March 1943, to help crew a new tanker that was built in Mobile, a T2 tanker. And I made several trips on that tanker. One of them was we went to Aruba and loaded aviation gas and went with about 8 other tankers across to the Mediterranean. They needed aviation gas over there. They were running it low. So
What year was this?
1943, early 1943. And it was a fascinating trip because they needed that gasoline, and we had more escort ships than we had tankers. And we did make it there all right, and unloaded the gasoline and made several more trips on that. And I thought it might be interesting that it was a Mobile-built ship, and it was Mobile.
Very much so. Now, where was your destination in the Mediterranean? North Africa?
Our ship went to Iran. The different ships went to different places, but we went to Iran. And they just cleared out the Germans from Iran when we got there. And it was an interesting thing. And one of the interesting things that I saw there was people committing suicide, jumping off a cliff. And these were people that had cooperated with the Nazis, and they were going to, they felt so bad, I guess. And some of them committed suicide. It's kind of a scary thing.
Did you see this from the port while you were on the ship? Did you disembark?
Yeah, I could see them from the ship, yeah. And it was a trip that nobody seemed to worry about, but it was worrisome because if something had hit that ship, it would all burned up.
Yeah. I mean, for 19 at the time,
Yeah.
that's a very disconcerting thing.
Yeah. And I met my first hero on that ship.
Sir,
I met my first hero on that ship.
tell me about that.
It was an accountant from Minnesota, and he had gone to the Merchant Marine because of physical problems. He couldn't get in anything else, and he had been burned up twice on ships, sunk twice. And this guy could have gone home and forgot about it, but he didn't. He kept coming back, and here he was on this tanker. And if it would have been a torpedo, that would have been his last one, you know. So maybe that was the kind of people we had on those ships.
Outbound coming back, what was that like? Did you have as strong an escort coming back
No.
after you were empty? Yeah.
No. We had a couple of escort ships coming back, but the ships broke off and went to different places.
Right.
And we were alone part of the time. So.
Yeah. Now, merchant marine ships, your ships are armed, I assume, weren't they, with light
Yes. They,
anti-aircraft maybe? Or?
they had anti-aircraft guns, 20 millimeters, and also had cannons on the bow and the stern of the ship.
Would these have been would this have been armament that the ship was built with, or something that might have been added later?
Well, they were added. They were built on the new ships, but on the older ships they were added later. And we were trained to handle those guns too. And we got called to battle a couple of times. But at one time we were being attacked by submarines in the North Atlantic. We manned battle stations for a while.
And the submarines, so I guess your escort, one of the corvettes or whatever, had detected the submarine with sonar?
Oh, there was several submarines. It was the Wolf Pack, they called it, and they sunk several ships in the convoy. And the closest we came to being sunk, our lookout at the time said that the torpedo missed us by 10 to 15 feet.
Oh my goodness.
And got the ship on the inside of it.
What time of day would that have been, the attack?
That was at nighttime.
Nighttime?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we could see the ships burning.
And then they would see the others by the outlines of the ship, I guess, because they had to they would surface, wouldn't they? To fire?
No. Well, they did come up to fire those torpedoes. The Germans would actually get inside the convoys, the submarines would. And
how much distance was there in between ships?
I would guess maybe 70 yards.
It's a pretty tight formation.
Yeah, pretty tight formation.
And the U-boats would get inside the convoy.
Yeah, they would come from forward and come down there.
And they just shooting torpedoes as they went, I guess.
Yeah.
That's I bet that was a very scary feeling, not knowing where something is.
Yeah, I guess it was. I don't remember being particularly scared. I don't think anybody was particularly scared. We had so much to do.
Yeah.
At that time that we didn't think too much about it.
Activity is a good cure for fear.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Right.
And did your escorts, were they ever able to sink a U-boat with a
They
depth
told us they
charge?
did. We don't know how many, but they were out there with the depth charges, and we were ready to drop some depth charges too.
Y'all carried depth charges
on the stern of it.
on the stern?
Yeah.
Now, would they just, things that looked like barrels, would they just drop, or were they kind of launched off the back?
Launched off the back and down they would go.
How did that work with a hydraulic launcher? I mean, how did that, I've often been curious.
Yeah. Some are hydraulic and some are actually with a spring-like affair that threw them out.
And you could set the fuse or the timer on that. Was this when you were going to Murmansk? Didn't you go to Murmansk?
Yes, I did.
To the Russians. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, again, I tell people that I was probably one of the luckiest guys in the war. In our convoy, we broke down before we got to the bad part around the North Cape of Norway. And they just, if you broke down, you're on your own. They all left us. And we got into Murmansk. We sailed north for a while to try to get away from the Cape, at least eyesight. And we got into Murmansk late, and we missed all the action.
Why was it so dangerous?
The Germans were on they were invading Russia at the time, and that was the only way Russians could get the supplies. And so they were taking supplies to the Russians, and the Germans had controlled Norway, and they would sink the ships around the North Cape of Norway. That was the spot where they did the most damage. And before that, there were some other German ships out there. The Graf Spee, I remember, was one that was close to us, and that's what we worried about after we broke down over there all alone.
Been picked off by a
We didn't
U-boat.
see anything except a couple of icebergs.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. When you say you were broken down, was it a mechanical problem?
Mechanical problem, yeah. And they got it cranked up in about 12 or 14 hours after they left us. And our skipper decided to go north as far as he could and sail in to the White Sea that way.
So you say you missed a lot of the action because you were broken down. What happened to the rest of the convoy?
Some of them got hurt. I'm not sure how many. As a matter of fact, there was a heck of a mix-up about us. And when we came back to Scotland, where we always staged coming and going, and back to Scotland, they would bring mail aboard, and we didn't have mail. And our ship had been reported sunk or lost. And my mother had been notified that we were presumed lost to sea. And so,
And they were still back in West Virginia. They hadn't moved. Or,
yeah, right.
my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm sure she was telling you the story after you got home. What was it like from her perspective?
Yeah.
When she
yeah,
gets
right,
that notification.
Right.
Did what was the, she gets the notification that your ship is lost or sunk,
Yeah.
and she thinks, I suppose on a ship she might maintain some hope that you could get out, but what was the lag time between that and saying, oh no, we made a mistake?
Actually, my mother didn't hear from me until we got back to New York.
So a considerable amount of time.
Considerable amount of time.
What, from New York to Murmansk, to Russia, how long would that take?
A month.
It's in long.
Took a long time. There was lots of drills and lots of zigzagging and so on. And we stayed in Scotland for a while, actually repairing ships and this sort of thing. And we'd leave from there, kick off from there to go to Murmansk.
When you were joining a convoy, would everybody leave at the same time, or would you maybe group at a certain point?
Actually, the way we left New York on my ship, and we went to Newfoundland, and there were some ships waiting for us there to join our convoy, and that was it. So there was two groups that merged together and went across the Atlantic.
And would you maintain radio silence throughout the whole trip using, I don't know, maybe semaphore or?
Yes. Semaphore and so on.
Which I would think is a difficult way for many ships to communicate, you know, is it done in a chain, or is there a lead ship that?
Oh, there were lead ships, right. There was a Commodore ship with a leader aboard. We called the Commodore leading the lead ship. And of course the Navy escort ships were involved. And I guess that's what you wanted to know.
Yes, sir, definitely. What were conditions like on the ship? I mean,
well, that's the part that some people interviewed us for. We were under Admiralty law, which means they had to feed us certain things and certain things, so we ate well. And so the conditions were pretty good. The bunks were small and this sort of thing, but you got used to that. But actually the conditions were good aboard the ship.
how many men would be aboard? Now, were these the Victory ships that they would build?
Liberty ships.
Liberty ships.
Liberty ships and Victory ships. Mine was a Liberty ship.
What's the difference?
The Liberty ship was just a cargo carrier. It was slow, and it got up to 10 knots. It was speeding.
So that's why it took a month to get to 10 knots.
Yeah.
That's
and they were built. The Russians, the ones that were going to go to Russia, were built with extra bands around the ship and around the decks to hold them together in rough weather.
and I guess the ice flow and things like that.
Right.
Were at night, would you have lights on, or did you?
No lights. And you could run without lights, and you had to be able to. Usually, you could see the other ships, and you stayed in tight formation.
Depending on the night.
That's the reason we kept that space between us.
Right.
Yeah, we could do that then.
How many men would be aboard one of these ships?
Crew was about 45, including the officers. And the Navy gun crew was, about 15 Navy gunners we'd have on board, plus their officer.
So the
So
Navy,
about 60 people.
about 60 people. So the Navy, the regular Navy, y'all would have been auxiliary to the Navy as nationalized merchant marine.
It was Naval Reserve.
Naval Reserve, and then you would have regular Navy seamen man the guns.
Man the guns, right?
Right.
We would help them, of course. We all
Right.
had gun training. And they loved it, those Navy guys. Boy, it was the best food they'd ever had up there.
Yeah. What was your most memorable trip?
I guess that was the trip to Russia.
Now you did that one once.
I did it one time, yeah.
What was it like? It was that's a long trip. That's a month.
Cold. Really cold.
Not even West Virginia cold. It's cold.
Oh man, West Virginia was the tropics compared to that. 60 below zero sometimes. That's what bothered us more than anything was the cold. We had on our ship we had two guys that couldn't handle it, the cold weather, and they kind of went off the rocker.
What happens when somebody goes off their rocker?
Well, you have to lock them up if they're bad, dangerous. But we had two on our ship, and we brought them back with us and put them off in the Azores on the way home to the hospital. But
And it was the cold that did
it's
it?
cold weather.
Because it never stops.
Never stop. It's just unrelenting. I remember, and the Russians took good care of us. Give them that credit. They had what they call in tourist clubs, which is the only places we could go to. And they would feed us drink and all kinds of different things. And by the way, they would try to get information out of us.
How was that? Tell me
Even
about
at that time, they were searching for information about the U.S. and its strengths and its navies and merchant fleets and all that thing.
How would they go about asking you the questions? Would they Buy you a drink or?
Yeah, buy you all they feed us drinks, vodka, and those clubs, it's all free. Beautiful Russian women.
I wasn't going to ask that because of our company, but that would be my guess, that they would have a little gal come up and buy you a drink or something.
Yeah, and when we got into Russia, they say ice water won't freeze, it does. I mean, the ocean, the salt water won't freeze, it does.
It does freeze.
Yeah, we were almost capsized when we got into there.
Because the
water
ice pushing
freezing on the deck.
Oh, the deck freezing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long were you ashore in Russia?
2 weeks at least. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how long.
That's a long time at 60 below.
Yeah. Well, it would get a little warmer. The sun would come up, I remember, about
For a brief period of time?
for 25, 30 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Have you had a desire to go back?
No. I guess that would be interesting, going back one time and see what it was like.
Yeah.
They treated us well, I can say that.
They're very friendly people.
And what we would do is make up big stories to tell the Russians.
Like what? Would you compete maybe to see who could tell the most outlandish?
No, we'd all have the same stories, so they'd believe it.
What was the story that you remember? Y'all were just amusing yourselves. That's great.
Yeah, we told them about the submarines at the North Pole and things like that, you know.
Oh my goodness.
And the Navy people would tell us that what we could tell without, you know.
Right. Be friendly, but don't give away the.
So boy, they were feeding us the vodka.
Now, vodka doesn't freeze though, but it'll get a little thick, I bet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What was your cargo on your way to Russia?
Cargo?
Yes, sir.
We had everything. We had ammunition, we had bombs, we had locomotives on deck.
Really?
Yeah, little locomotives that they use in Europe. You know.
And they were lashed down to the deck.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And food or anything like that? Did you?
We didn't take food per se for the Russians. Mostly just war material.
What was the demeanor of the Russians? I mean, those were pretty dark days. You know, 40. What was that? 43, I guess. 44.
43. Yeah.
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 Were they downcast or were they?
No, surprisingly, no. They weren't supposed to communicate with us, except in the tourist clubs.
Where the people had been approved to.
Yeah, approved. But they did. I remember giving a guy a carton of cigarettes. He couldn't take them, but he would take one pack. He could hide that.
Yeah, but he couldn't. Isn't that interesting?
He couldn't take the carton. So they were nice people. They really were, but they were controlled pretty much. And we were surprised that some of the things that they told us, you know, when they get a chance. But they wouldn't talk to us out on the deck. If one could sneak in the forecastle, they could talk to you.
What did they tell you?
I would tell you all kinds of things about what's going on. And people were dying out there working in that weather, you know, outside.
But they would tell you that in forecastle, but not where they could be seen by the.
Right. But it was an interesting time.
Yeah. What was your? You were in the war from the very beginning.
No, not really. I was on coastwise ships.
What is that?
Ships that just ply around New Orleans and Mobile and that sort of place.
In Coast Watch, and they.
Yeah, and up the rivers and so on.
Looking out for.
Yeah, until 1943.
Until 43. What kind of ships were these that on Coast Watch? Just whatever y'all had, or?
Tugboats, all kinds of things. barges.
Would y'all look out for U-boats and?
No, they didn't have any problems then with them. In fact, the Germans weren't too interested in us. But at that time, until we got on the big ships, but they sunk some ships in Mobile Harbor almost.
Really, the Germans?
Yeah.
So they almost in the bay.
Yeah.
Tell me about that a little bit.
I can't tell you too much about Mobile, but once going into New Orleans, we just got in picked up the river pilot at New Orleans, and a ship going out got sunk right behind us.
Wow.
And so we sailed on up the Mississippi to New Orleans. That was while I was still basically a civilian.
Right before
Yeah.
they'd come in.
Yeah.
What was your impression of the progression of the war when the Battle of the Atlantic and the decline of the U-boats? Because the Germans started losing so many U-boats. I've forgotten what it was, a month, 20 a month or something
Yeah,
like
a
that.
bunch of U-boats being sunk.
Did it get easier, I guess?
As it went along, yes, it did.
It did. And where all...
I think that our convoy that was attacked in 1943, from what I can read, it was about one of the last convoys that really got attacked.
Just because of the decimation of the wolf packs, I
Yeah,
guess,
right,
they've been
right.
destroyed. Or,
The rest, after that, after a certain other time, it was mostly lone wolves, one submarine
mhm.
somewhere, you know.
Hoping to get lucky, I guess,
Right.
or waiting along
Right.
a route. Did you ever see a U-boat?
Ever see a U-boat?
Mhm.
I never did, no, never did.
That's probably a good thing that you didn't see one, I guess. But
Yeah.
Tell me, how many? Would you call it a cruise, or when you went to Russia and that was a month, and you went to the Mediterranean and that took a month because of the slow nature of the ship, 10 knots,
Yeah.
which is very slow.
Yeah.
But you would also zigzag, and would it double your time or double the length?
Double or triple the time.
Mm-hmm. What other cruises or trips did you make to Europe or?
I made a couple more to England.
Where did you go to in England?
Let's see, the first one was in Bristol, I think.
What were you carrying to England?
Just war materials.
Just war materials. And what year would that have been?
Excuse me?
What year would that have been?
That'd been 43, 44.
43. On your first trip to the Mediterranean, as a 19-year-old, I guess leaving this country for the first time, would that be accurate?
That'd be accurate.
Did you go ashore?
Yes.
And that's, yeah. And what were the people, like you said, that the collaborators were throwing themselves off cliffs and you saw that, but other than that, were they happy to be out from under the Nazis, or?
Well, I remember we couldn't pay for a drink.
Well, that's a pretty good indication that they were happy you were there.
They were glad to see us.
They were, and you were carrying the aviation fuel.
Yeah.
And that would have been for the Desert War. And that was 43. So the Desert War was well underway. We were.
Yeah, of course,
Had already-
Iran was clear at that time. and several other ports. Some of the tankers went to different ports, Algiers. And,
So you went through the Suez Canal?
yeah.
What was, that was still a British-owned thing at that time.
Yeah.
What was that like going through the Suez?
You know, I don't remember that much about it.
Yeah.
I remember the Rock of Gibraltar.
Sir?
I remember seeing the Rock of Gibraltar. I thought it was
What was that like?
myth.
Did you stop there at the Rock of Gibraltar?
No, we sailed on through, but it was interesting.
And to think that the English stayed there throughout the whole war, that's,
Yeah, right.
that's something else.
Right.
That's it's a rock, isn't it?
It's a rock.
Was it a fascinating thing coming from West Virginia and Mobile?
It was. It was a fascinating thing.
What ports of call did y'all have, or did you just go directly? You had to refuel, I suppose.
We went to Iran this time. Later on, I went to a couple of other ports. A couple in Italy after Italy was cleared out mostly.
So you did go to Italy. Where did you go?
Let's see. Venice, I remember that. And
With loads of
yeah,
armament.
yeah. And I don't remember the East Coast port, but we went to a couple of different places.
And so would the combat zone still be kind of active, or would you be the supply chain after everything was kind of settled down?
There was a danger of being bombed by airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
They were still, Germans still wasn't giving up.
Right.
But that was the only thing. But we didn't have any problems either time at all.
So you didn't see any German planes, or?
No.
What were the people in Italy like after they had overthrown
Oh,
Mussolini
they were
and
happy
the
people.
fascists? They were happy.
They were happy people, right.
And we had moved the Germans out of there.
Yeah.
Did you go to Sicily?
No. Didn't go to Sicily.
Yeah. What other ports in North Africa did you go to? Do you remember?
I went to Iran and Algiers and one other port. I'm trying to think of what it was now. Can't remember. It's some small port.
So would you bring material directly from the United States to these ports, or from elsewhere?
From the United States. On the tankers, we'd pick up the oil and gasoline loaded in Aruba or Curacao.
In a way station that would be a staging area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that I haven't asked that I should?
Well, I made a trip to, went to Pacific too.
Okay.
Went to the Philippines after they'd basically cleared up.
So was this after the war in Europe?
Yeah, this is still a part of the war, yeah. And we were supposed to be involved in a invasion thing of Formosa, but they called it off, and we came back home. But I think they called that because they knew Japan was going to surrender shortly.
Right.
Which they did.
They knew more than they let on, I guess, with the atomic bombs.
Right.
Well, how did you find the Philippines? Did you like that?
It's hard to say. It was so messed up, so torn up. We enjoyed it, and I had a cousin in the Army up inland, and I went up there to see him.
How long after the Philippines were liberated were you there?
Let's see, I'm not sure. Well, it wasn't totally liberated when we were there.
Oh, really?
There were some parts of it still.
Some of the islands?
Yeah, some parts of it still under Japanese control.
They were pretty hard on the Filipinos, weren't they?
Yeah, they were really hard on Americans too.
Right. Well, and the Filipinos were kind of Americans at the time since it was a protectorate from the Spanish-American War.
Yeah. And needless to say, the Filipinos were glad to see us.
I bet they were. Were they happy to see MacArthur?
You bet they were.
Yeah, because he'd lived, I guess, most of his adult life over there, it seems like.
Yeah.
Did you ever see?
See MacArthur?
Yes,
no.
sir.
No.
Out of both theaters, you know, you have the European theater and you have the Pacific theater. Where do you think that what you did made the most difference in the war effort?
I think the taking the gasoline to the Mediterranean, because we were told, and I don't know if it was scuttlebutt or what, that they were just about empty.
Wow. And this was aviation fuel.
Aviation fuel, yeah. And then, of course, the Russian trip. They needed those supplies badly because the Germans were still advancing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was pretty much the heat of the Eastern Front there.
Yeah.
And without people like you, they couldn't have pushed them back. They might not acknowledge that now, but they didn't have the material to do it on their own.
The Russians gave me a medal.
Tell me about that. I read this article that was provided me. Tell me about getting the medal from the Russian ambassador.
In 1985, I got a letter saying they wanted me in Baltimore. They were going to present us with some awards. And Jan and I, my wife, went to Baltimore. And they had about, I guess, 200 of us there that period of time. They presented us with the Russian Medal of Freedom. Mm-hmm. It was an interesting medal. And I guess it was kind of thrilling in a way, you know, so long after the war.
That they hadn't forgotten.
Hadn't forgotten, no.
That means something. Saying thank you is an important thing, I think.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that.
Yeah.
You got another thank you, I think, as a merchant marine when the merchant marines during wartime were given veteran status.
Yeah.
Was that a big deal when President Reagan signed that into? It was 86. When was that? Something like that.
Well, it was in a way. I mean, we would have access to the VA system.
Right.
And that was the big thing for me. The rest of it, they actually had military status for the war years. And it was a pretty big thing, I guess.
Having access to the VA, I mean,
Access
since
to VA.
You were a veteran,
Yeah.
but that's having access to it when you needed it too.
Yeah.
In our country, saying thanks, not just the Soviet Union, but our own country, acknowledging the sacrifices and the effort that you and other men like you put in your youth. You gave your youth when you went into war.
Yeah.
You were 19. How old were you? 19.
Yeah, about that.
And then when the war ended, what did you do?
I continued on ships as a civilian. I worked for American Export Lines for a while as a deck officer, and then I switched over to United Fruit Company as I ordered back in Mobile.
You go down to Central America?
Yeah, bring bananas back. And they built those ships. They were super yachts is what they were.
How was that? Tell me about that.
Oh, they're beautiful white ships. They got them replaced because they lost just about all their ships during the war. And they had wooden decks. Just beautiful ships. And we enjoyed them a lot.
Going out of Mobile?
out of Mobile and New Orleans.
Gulfport, did you ever do the bananas going into Gulfport?
No, we never did.
Yeah.
My ship, others probably did. But we sure enjoyed the one big thing I did want to mention that was weird is after the war ended, they still sunk some merchant ships after the war ended.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, they hit mines and all kinds of stuff. And when we were able to turn the lights on, leave the lights on at night, that was fantastic. You know, I just could imagine being out there with the lights, all the lights shining.
It gets pretty dark at sea at night, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So do many ships hit mines, derelict mines?
Yeah. Incidentally, I was just reading an article before I came over here. Merchant Marine lost a greater percentage of their personnel than any branch of the service.
Seems that I heard that at some point.
Yeah.
And that's the sacrifice that you gave for the country. That's that's a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah.
That there was that higher rate of casualty and loss.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, when we see a U-boat coming, you can hide
That's
or
right.
run away. I mean, it's there's no retreat. It's you're
No place to hide. That's right.
big merchant ship. It's like a lamb with a wolf in a lot of ways. What was it like when the war ended? Tell me a little bit, if you. Where were you when you heard that the war had ended? In
the Pacific.
board ship?
Yeah.
What was it like? Did the captain announce it over the?
Yeah. The war was over.
What did the men do?
Absolutely. Got drunk. No, I take that back.
No, you don't.
They celebrated.
You celebrated there. Let's just speak in euphemisms. He celebrated heavily. I bet that was a great day, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a great day.
Where were you when you heard that the war in Europe was over?
Let's see. I think I was in New Jersey.
That was another good day.
Yeah.
That was another good day, wasn't it? When did you first see your family after you went into active service?
When I came back from that Russian trip, actually my mother had been notified that we were lost at sea. And she had not been notified that we'd been found.
Did you send her a telegram?
You know, the word snafu
Yes, sir.
was a product of World War II. And I went home with a 6 months beard, 6 months of hair, and knocked on the door like a salesman. My mother come to the door, she almost fainted.
She thought you were a ghost, huh?
Yeah.
Had she thought you were dead or lost?
Yeah, she thought we were lost at sea.
That's a horrible thing for a mother to go through, to grieve like that. Was your dad still living, or?
He was still living, yeah.
What about brothers and sisters?
I had a bunch of them, and I was the only one involved in World War II.
Were you the oldest?
No, I was in the middle.
In the middle?
Yeah.
What did your family, do they farm in West Virginia, or?
Excuse me?
What did they farm?
My dad was a businessman, and he lost his business during the Depression. And he continued to work for other people.
Right.
During the war.
Just like a lot of folks
Yeah.
had to.
He finally went up to Detroit and served as a policeman for some of the plants up there. But everybody else stayed home, I guess.
What was it like that first time coming home back to West Virginia and your mother and daddy?
It was weird.
Yeah.
below our house was a place we called the Dark Place.
Why you call it the dark place?
Because the road went, the creek went along and the road went along under a bunch of trees that hung over. And it was so dark there at night.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to have all kinds of ghost stories about the Dark Place. And coming home that time was the only time I could whistle through the Dark Place.
Because you'd been to a
Didn't
darker
scare me a
place.
bit.
You'd been to a darker place, I reckon, maybe.
Yeah.
Was it hard talking to folks about stuff that you really couldn't describe to them?
Yes.
Did you feel kind of isolated when you were with your family, I guess?
Somewhat.
You know what I'm saying?
Somewhat, yeah, strange. It was hard to tell them about some of these things that they didn't understand.
Something that you thought was so important, they just didn't.
Yeah, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I had a cousin that got shot up in Korea,
Mm-hmm.
and he had the same problem. He came home. He was a dancer, and he lost a leg in Korea,
Oh my.
and he had the same problems. So he enjoyed talking to me when we get together, because he knew that I could relate, to what was happening to him.
Right. Right. And that's, I think, finding somebody that can relate, even though Korea wasn't your experience, but you still have that same kind of almost disjointed thing coming back and trying to reintegrate into society, I suppose, after the...
I had no problems at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So you served, after the war, you served pretty much down here on the Gulf Coast on
Yeah.
ships?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, well, both coasts, New York. We bring bananas to New York and take them up to Seattle sometimes. But it was interesting.
Yeah.
I guess being on the ships after the war was something I was familiar with. So, you coast right into that.
Was it a big change when the Merchant Marine was relieved from government service back into civilian life?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Just from one to
Did
the
the
other?
same thing.
Exactly. Well, who was the most colorful character you met in your time during the war?
Oh, boy. There's a bunch of them.
That you can speak about in mixed
Let
company.
me tell you, the Merchant Marine, I'm not sure you're aware, got all the misfits. They got people that couldn't get into the military for one reason or another.
Like that accountant.
They talk about, one of those articles talk about a guy with one leg, and this sort of thing. And getting away from those guys was hard because they were good people.
Yeah.
And that was one of the hardest things, is leaving the sea.
That you'd gone through this experience with this group of men.
Yeah.
Did they change much during your time? Or were you with the same crew?
Well, what you would do when you came back to a port on a merchant ship, you sign off. And if you're going to stay on the ship, you sign right back on at the same time. That's one leg to another. But if you took some leave, you were on your own until you signed up for another ship. So we had a place, say in New York, and just about every port we could go to, and they would post openings for seamen on these various ships, and you'd pick out a ship.
So you really got to know a lot of the men.
A lot of people,
When a ship was hit or you heard that it was lost, likely as not, you knew a good many of those men that went down with it, I would guess.
Yeah.
That had to be pretty tough.
Yeah. I lost two friends, I think, in the convoy where we were attacked by the submarine. Never saw them again after that. They were on another ship.
Yeah.
And we were told in Scotland that ship didn't make it. So, they didn't make it, they were gone.
Yeah.
And I was never able to contact them later, so I assumed they were lost at sea.
Do you have any contact now with any of the men you served with, or?
Not now. I did for a while. But not now.
People just kind of lose track of each other, I
Yeah,
suppose.
lose track of each other. Of course, at our age.
Yeah.
A lot of them are in their 50s and 60s then. So. I had a skipper out of on the tanker that I got,
Yes, sir.
77 years old, and he'd been retired for years. And they called him back. He came back, volunteered to come back. And he was an interesting fellow.
He was 77 when he was a skipper on that cruise to the Mediterranean?
Yep.
My goodness. He must have been really good.
Well, he was good, but they needed
They
seamen.
needed it, experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you learn a lot from folks like that?
Oh yeah.
Because I noticed you went from, you weren't ordinary, but you're an able seaman up to deck officer, and that's quite a transition, isn't it?
Not really. You're learning these things as you go along. I had to go to officer school,
Mm-hmm.
but
Where was that?
New London, Connecticut.
New London, Connecticut.
Yeah.
What exactly is a deck officer?
On deck you have this captain. You have three, what they call mates, first, second, and third mate. And those were the deck officer crew. And you had the engine crew and the same thing, chief engineer and first, second, and third engineers. And actually there were 8 officers basically on the ship, plus the purser, as you call it, and so on. But it was very, you really didn't see them too much, all of them, because you're on different watches.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you see the chief mate. I would lead the chief mate.
Right.
First time I'd seen him all day.
Just everybody's in their own special,
Yeah, that's right.
specialized.
Usually associated with, if off watch, associated with the engine crew.
Mm-hmm.
They were, some of their people were off watch too.
Just whoever happened to be around at the time, I suppose.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think I'm getting the sign, but Mr. Hill, it's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
God bless you, and thank you for your service to the country.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.